By now, there are quite a number of scary, creepy, and disturbing stories that I've covered in this channel. Each one seemed to be weirder than the last. But the incident that I'm going to cover in today's video really takes the cake. Where? I really don't know, but nowhere good, I can assure you of that. Before we get started, an obligatory disclaimer is in order. As usual, tonight's story will be going to some dark places. Also, I have found and translated this story from Ni-chan, otherwise known as 2chan, a Japanese anonymous message board. This means that the following story may or may not be true. But let's be real, almost anything that was posted and translated from anonymous message boards is often little more than a conjecture, and a bunch of lies stitched up together to make up a story, all for your amusement. But it also may be true, we simply do not know. Now with that said, on with today's story. The incident I'm about to relay in this post happened about 35 years ago, give or take a few years. I can't really remember exactly. It took place in northern Japan, in one of the more rural cities. I won't tell you exactly where for privacy reasons, although not that it really matters at this point. This incident never made big waves in the national Japanese news. NHK never really picked up this particular story. Only the local town newspaper wrote a few articles about it. And even then, this was the 80s. Internet wasn't really a thing back then. This was the paper newsletter days. I've tried to Google this incident since, but failed to find any articles mentioning or covering this incident online, which is strange because people died. I almost died too because of it, which is why I'm posting about it here. I'm hoping that if I get it off my chest, maybe my anxiety that has plagued me for all these years will be lessened somehow. So, around 30 plus years ago, I had an appointment at a local dentist office. Nothing major, just a minor fix-up. My tooth was already dead, meaning the root canal was cleaned and fixed a few years ago. It's just that a small chunk of the tooth cracked and I needed the shape of the tooth restored. A routine procedure likely to be finished in under an hour. A day before the visit, however, I had to make a call and postpone it. The reason being, I had caught a nasty stomach virus, both vomiting and having a water jet from the rear end, gushing from both ends, farther than the eye could see. I must have eaten something wrong the day before, or maybe touched some dirty surface and then touched my mouth with my unwashed hand or something. Anyway, so I called the dentist office, told them briefly about my condition, and rescheduled my visit sometime next week. Afterwards, I proceeded to suffer the remaining nausea of my stomach virus / food poisoning while hugging my trusty bucket feeling extremely weak, dizzy, head spinning, stomach churning, feeling extremely tired but unable to sleep, and constantly having a Shakespearean dilemma. To vomit or not vomit? That is the question. The following contents are what I've read on the morning newspaper 2 days later after my postponed visit. Apparently, some middle-aged lady visited the dentist office in question during the very same day that I was previously scheduled for, and she also needed her tooth fixed. During the procedure, there were 3 people inside: the patient, the dentist, and the dentist's assistant. However, during the procedure, the dentist lady needed to disinfect some tools or something. I can't really remember. Anyway, she needed the liquid called the spirit to do it, otherwise known as medicinal alcohol, at around 90% strong, a very potent substance. For some inexplicable reason, the 2 dentist ladies kept the said alcohol liquid in a large 5-liter glass jar. For an even more incomprehensible reason, they had a sticker with a sign, "Drinkable water," quote-unquote, slapped on the side of said jar. What the fuck? If that's your reaction after hearing such nonsense, I can assure you that my thoughts were the same while reading the news article. Apparently, neither the dentist nor the dental assistant weren't sure if the liquid was water or medicinal spirit. Supposedly, it produced no smell, which I also find to be a complete nonsense. But continuing, the 2 doctors, quote-unquote, had a brilliant idea of try to ignite it. "But I don't have anything to ignite it with," the dentist assistant said. It was around that moment that the owner of the dentist office in question, a guy in his 40s, came inside the room. "No problem, use mine," he said. The owner tossed a lighter to the dental assistant. She catched it. Apparently the boss was on a smoking break until then. After all, we can't have our favorite patient treated with tools that were disinfected with just mere water, now can we? The dentist lady proclaimed. The boss man nodded in agreement, smiling. The idea that our band of characters had was that if it's really a medicinal spirit and not water, which often has around 90% alcohol, once this liquid is introduced to fire, it should light up like gasoline. And so they did just that. The dental assistant grabbed the 5-liter glass jar and clumsily poured some liquid onto the tabletop nearby. Then she grabbed the lighter that her boss man tossed just seconds prior, which was normally used to light up cigarettes, and she ignited the alcohol poured on the table. Naturally, the liquid caught flame, and since she messily splashed it from the jar all over the table, after a couple of seconds, the entire goddamn table was on fire. The patient lady, who was sitting in the dentist's chair nearby, saw the commotion and was about to stand up and run away from the cabinet. "Ah, don't worry about it, it's just alcohol. It'll burn out in a couple of seconds, even if we don't try and put it out. Keep sitting here, it will be fine." The assistant lady was clumsily flailing about with her arms, using some cloth and her medicinal coat to try and snuff out the flame. And then she accidentally knocked the glass jar that was placed on the table nearby. Like I said, the jar had 5 liters of extremely flammable, high-proof alcohol. The spilled liquid from the jar fell on the already burning liquid on the tabletop. The flame traveled through the flammable liquid rapidly inside the jar as it fell onto the table, and then like a bomb, almost the entire 5 liters of extremely flammable liquid inside the jar exploded, dousing in flames both the assistant, the patient, and the doctor herself. The assistant had it the worst. Since she was the closest, she immediately became a living, running, screaming human torch. Now, if being doused from head to toe in burning high-proof alcohol wasn't bad enough, the fact that the medicinal uniforms that they were wearing were made entirely out of synthetic fabric meant that her outfit was extremely flammable. She was engulfed in flames instantly, and thus her horrific screams were the first to echo outside the room. The burning dental assistant ran out immediately, dashing out the door, where the husband of the patient waited, no doubt horrified by the sudden crash sound and the death shriek. How the patient's husband didn't get a heart attack after seeing a woman charging at him, covered from head to toe in flames, screaming like a banshee, arms flailing, full-on agony and panic mode, I will never know. Apparently the journalist who covered the incident was perplexed by this too. But the man, much kudos for his bravery, did his best to somehow tackle the woman to the ground, initiate stop, drop and roll, and using his own coat, most likely, somehow he managed to put out her flames. Meanwhile, inside the cabinet, both the doctor and the patient were also doused in the flaming liquid. However, while both women tried to put out each other's flames by desperately smacking each other, their futile attempts to help one another quickly turned to panic, as the only thing they achieved was igniting each other even more. And with blood-curdling screams, both women covered in flames came running out of the cabinet together. Both of them were also put out by the same husband and some passers-by from the street who luckily came to help after hearing the commotion. Meanwhile, the owner of the entire establishment apparently was so horrified by the entire chain of events that he just crawled into the farthest corner of the room and just sat there. Stupid and careless statement though it may be, the doctor's earlier words were true. It was but a mere alcohol. And since most of the things in the dentist office were made either out of plastic, metal, or ceramic, the alcohol pretty soon burned out, and the fire pretty much extinguished itself. Meanwhile, the owner just kept sitting in the corner, eyes wide, in complete shock. The paramedics had to move him out with a stretcher. He was fine, only a little bit of burning liquid splashed on his hands. The rest of the group, they weren't so lucky. The dental assistant who ignited the alcohol and had the entire 5-liter jar of flammable liquid pretty much exploding in her face. She had 90% of burns on her body. She was the first to perish over the coming days. The dentist suffered 70% burns on her body, and the patient is 60. All 3 women perished within 2 weeks after the incident. From what I remember, it was due to sepsis. The owner suffered a complete mental breakdown. He had to be admitted to the asylum for mentally unwell. I guess I can't really blame the guy. He literally saw 3 people burned alive in front of him. If memory serves, after about a couple of months, he was released from said asylum. Within half a year of this incident, he ended his own life. What the hell? I remember thinking to myself after reading the newspaper back then. All the nausea from the previous day was gone, I remember, replaced by fear, confusion, anxiety, an overly nagging question as to why. I could have been there during that time if I hadn't cancelled my appointment. Does that mean I would have become a human torch instead of these people? More to the point, why on God's green earth did these people thought that it was a good idea to pour a highly flammable liquid on the tabletop right next to the huge glass jar with it, and then ignite it just to see if it burns? I don't get it. Couldn't they just smell it, or put a finger inside the jar and then touch their tongue with the finger? Alcohol has a distinct taste. Immediately they would have known that it was alcohol. Even vodka has this distinct alcoholic disinfectant smell, and the stronger the percentage it has, the nastier it stinks in my experience. Same as with every flammable liquid, including gasoline. It's enough to open the lid and the liquid immediately releases a pungent stench. And to think that these people were doctors with a medicinal degree. What the hell were they thinking? Were they thinking at all? I guess since they managed to slap a sticker on the 5-liter jar of the flammable liquid with words drinkable water, this probably answers my previous question. So what am I to make of this? Was this drinkable water sticker some sort of a prank? Or were these people had no functioning nose and literally no sense of taste, so they could drink 90% alcohol like water? Were they drunk during this horrific event? From which shady back alley dealer did they bought this alcohol that they weren't even sure or had forgotten if it's alcohol or water? Why pour alcohol into a drinkable water jar? Why even have 5 liters of drinkable water in a glass jar to begin with in the dentist's office? It's not like they didn't have a water tap. They did. It was literally inside the same room. The more I think about this case, the more questions arise inside my head. The more questions I start to ask. the more nonsensical this whole sequence of events becomes. All I know is this: if not for my fated food poisoning, I may as well have burned alive the next day in that dentist's office. And the only explanation as to why, at least in my opinion, would have been gross and, dare I say, even criminal negligence, extreme incompetence, egregious violation of work safety, and just plain old foolishness, I guess. I don't know. I have no words. Like I said, this event really messed me up. I went to the different dentist office in my area later on and got my tooth fixed good and proper. I discussed this event with my new dentist, and she was also baffled about the incident. Both my new dentist and I agreed that it simply does not compute in our heads how such thing could have even happened. I mean, to summarize in a nutshell, a person went inside the dentist office to fix her tooth. 3 people burned alive during the procedure: patient, doctor, and her assistant. I don't know. Like I said, curiously, this event wasn't really reported much by the local news. And you won't find a report about it in the Japanese news online, probably because it happened many years ago, before internet was really a thing. Unfortunately, over the years, the newspaper with the article from 30 years ago got lost. Most likely during the number of times I moved to a different rental apartments during that time. So regrettably, I am not able to post a photo of the original article. All I have is my memory of those events to rely upon. Please understand. If there is anything to be learned from this, be careful with flammable substances. If you value your life, that is. Fire is no joke. And that's where the post ended. I mean, yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Except that the author of this Ni-chan post was right. Fire is no joke indeed. And that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Take care, guys, and be safe out there. And please press like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video. And I'll see you in the next one.